Hello and welcome back to the OTB channel. Okay, today I realised that the channel's now more than 2 years old, and more significantly for me, it's been 15 months now since I sort of swapped over to using tiling window managers. So it's high time that I did a mini review and look at the different tilers that I've been using over the last 15 months and give you my views. See you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So yeah, I've been looking at, 2 years into the channel, and I was looking back at some of my old videos. And when I produced my first video on i3 and Bspwm, it was back in March 2020. So just going into the first lockdown. And I'm still using tiling window managers, and I've used quite a few along the way. So I thought what I'd do today is I'd take you through the journey. Most of them are still on this machine, which is my main desktop. Some of them are configured a little bit more for my laptop that I use in the house, Qtile being one. As you'll see when I get to the Qtile review, there's a few configurations that I need to change there to get it to work on this system, which is a shame, but hey, it is what it is. You get the mistakes along with everything else with me. But I'm going to show you what I've still got on this system and how I got to where I'm at the moment. And I'm going to kind of finalize this by giving you my views of which tiling window managers I like the best. I will say that most of my tilers look very similar to each other because I know what I like. I know how I like them to look. I've got the key bindings, so they're all the same on all of them. They're all, they're all functional. So my choices have come down to really what I've learned while I've been using the tilers and how easy and understandable I found the configuration. There's going to be some notable omissions here because I don't have the configs anymore. i3 and Awesome Window Manager. I didn't spend long with either of those. It was right at the beginning of my journey. So Bspwm is really the first tiler. And I also haven't included Herb's LeftWM because although that's on this machine, that was just a quick look. And to be honest, it's quite similar to Bspwm. But without further ado, let's go in to the mini reviews or the mini what happened with each window manager, and we'll start with Bspwm. So you should see in front of you now my Bspwm desktop. Not technically the first one that I tried. I did play around with i3 and I did play around with Awesome, but I didn't save those configs. So Bspwm is the first one where I've got the config saved and it's still on my system from when I first installed it. And I do ultimately consider it to be probably the first tiler that I used because when I was playing with i3 and Awesome, I didn't really get into it. And the main problem was I couldn't cope with shifting over to key bindings. And it's a different way of working compared to if you're using a desktop environment. But I forced myself to do it with Bspwm. And I stuck with it for a few months. And I can't believe I produced the video on this back in March 2020. So we're looking at, 14, 15 months ago. So I didn't realise it was quite that long that I'd been messing about with these things. But as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward desktop here. It's got polybar, and I remember that the thing that took me the longest was messing about with polybar. I'm using Alacrity on all of my tiling window managers, and with Bspwm it has this weird thing where you open terminals and it's almost circular. each terminal gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you go around it. But not a problem. I only ever use, a couple of terminals at most. So that wasn't a big issue. It also had, and one of the big pulls for me at the time was it had a system tray with polybar. And for some reason, I was wedded to the system tray at the time. Don't really know why when you look at it, because it's only got, sound, network manager, and a volume icon. So nothing really. I mean, I don't use one anymore. But at the time, I was quite stuck on it. What appealed to me about Bspwm, though, is it was pretty simple to configure. The main thing was polybar. I mean, if I just switch over, you have a configuration file, bspwmrc in your .config file, which is pretty simple, to be honest. You have your startup items here, and I'm launching polybar, and I'm also launching a script in my bin folder, which literally just lists the PyCharm and all the bits and pieces that I want to launch. It also sets up your screens, what you want, or which workspaces or tags, if you like, you want on each screen. And the way I've got this configured, it's a dual screen system. I have workspaces 1 to 4 on the screen that you can see, my primary screen. I have workspaces 5 to 8 on my secondary screen. And then I remember this last line here. I had to figure out how to use this. Bspwm kept messing up the screens the way round they were. And for some reason, I had to use this little switch. I'm not entirely sure what it means. The rest I've pretty much gone with what was there by default, to be honest. I quite like the fact that you don't have to worry about your key bindings within that config. You have a separate key bindings file and program called, always had trouble saying this, SXHKDRC. Again, it's in your config directory, and it's quite understandable. It's pretty straightforward. And yeah, I set everything up there. So took me a while to get to grips with it and get everything running as I wanted, but the key bindings and the basic config were not a problem. The thing that took me the longest to set up was polybar. And I think with polybar, it's just a case of, reading the man page, looking at lots of different examples, realizing that you've got modules in there that you use and then reference for each screen. And I'm not going into the nuts and bolts of it, but it took me a while to actually get started. But nevertheless, get started I did. And as you can see, I've got some icons. In fact, at some point, I used to just have straightforward black and white awesome icons there. But at some point, I see I've changed them over to color emojis. Either way, it looks fine. What else did I do? Yeah, I discovered Rofi. Rofi has been something of a constant throughout my journey with tiling window managers. I think it's a great menu system, and even when I'm using a desktop environment, which isn't very often these days, I still use Rofi as basically as my system, my menu, if you like, and all worked well. I'd set up my resolution, my screen resolution, by setting a configuration file up in the USR share directory and hooking that to the LeftWM config. I think I've talked about that before, so that I've got 2 full HD screens, and I'm defining what is my primary screen and what is my secondary screen. What I did do is, let me just move to my bin directory, and I think it's run.bspwm. Yeah, there we go. one of the startup items, as well as polybar, is just this bash file, essentially, which I've got in my bin folder, which starts PyCom. It's not transparent at the moment. I've got transparency disabled in the Alacrity config because it's just easy to see when I'm showing things. I'm starting Nitrogen to set the wallpaper. I'm starting the volume controller. I'm starting the network manager applet. I'm starting Pamac. Pamac's not actually on this system this week because there was some issues when Pac-Man changed over to version 6. So that would normally appear in the system tray as well. I'm setting up my UK keyboard, and I'm starting the screensaver. So pretty much that's all it is. And I really enjoyed it. But of course, once I'd got this sorted and started to get used to it, that sort of got me going, because then it wasn't enough to just go back to i3 and the awesome window manager. I wanted to kind of move forward and try a bit of everything. So can you tell what it is yet? Well, it's Spectrwm. And this was it was sort of my next experiment, but actually there were a few false starts moving from Bspwm. I'd been watching DT and following various channels on YouTube where I'd seen Qtile and Xmonad. And I really, really fancied trying them. I did. I quite liked the look of the master and stack way that the default desktop was configured. I liked the idea of how workspaces were managed, that you have your workspaces floating across both your screens and they're dynamic. Unlike Bspwm, which technically is a manual tiler, although not entirely. But Xmonad and Qtile are dynamic tilers. And I had a go at configuring them. I think, like most people, I started off with DT's configs, but they didn't suit me, so I started to play about and to modify them. And I failed. I could not get those two things going. But I saw a review, again I think DT, where he was looking at Spectrwm. And this was almost like an Xmonad clone, but easier to configure. So I thought I'd give that a go. And actually it was incredibly simple, and I stuck with it for a while. You can see it's got its own bar. It doesn't use polybar. And you can see here that though I haven't got icons on this, I don't know if I could put icons on it. I probably could, but I never actually played with that. I've played with different colours and different scripts and commands showing up on here, plus the date. No system tray. That worried me a bit at the time. But yeah, I mean, I'm using Alacrity again. And you've got your traditional master and stack version, just as you have in Xmonad there. So I quite enjoyed using this. How did I configure this? It didn't actually take that long. You have a simple, essentially a text file here, which is human readable, unlike Xmonad or Qtile. And I didn't find it as complicated to get to grips with as polybar. And you basically set up all your standard key bindings in here. It's pretty straightforward. There's a very good and very detailed man page, and if you look at that, you're soon to get to grips with this. And I sorted out all the key bindings pretty quickly, to be honest. One of the things that has always taken me the longest as I've moved to different tiling window managers is getting the bar configured. That's where you have to get down and dirty. And this has a separate baraction.sh file. And essentially, the thing I learned using Spectrwm was about how to use kind of inline scripts. I say inline scripts. They're not scripts as such. They're commands. So we've got the hard disk here up on the bar, and there's the command for the hard disk. I'm just using the mem command for CPU. You can see I've got a little scriptette there for the net. The speed, the up and down speed, I have actually got a bash script in my bin directory, in my bin directory I can see there, and I'm just referencing that here. And then right at the bottom, I've got just a little loop here, so essentially loops forever. And I've got all the individual items, so the layout of the bar. The thing that took me the longest, actually, was getting the colours there, because you can see all the colour codes here on the bottom. It tells you how to do this in the man page, but just getting to grips with exactly how it happens took a while. Nevertheless, I was up and running pretty quickly with it, and it does work very much like Xmonad. It's a lot simpler to configure, and I was really impressed with it. And I think I probably would have stuck with Spectrwm, but of course the draw of wanting to mess around with more tiling window managers hadn't gone away. And I kept hearing about these others that were quite, hardcore. And the one that kept coming up, apart from Xmonad and Qtile, which I'd given up with, I'd failed on them, was DWM. So, had to be done. So, DWM had to be the next project. And I've changed the wallpaper to add a bit of variety here, but here you can see my DWM screen. And yes, I know, they all look the same, my tilers, essentially. But that's because I know what I like, I know the style, and I've got all the key bindings set to pretty much the same. So there's not going to be huge differences in terms of how they look. But I found DWM surprisingly easy, actually, to work with. I didn't have to rely on a package manager. I just did a git clone from the DWM repo. I did a sudo make clean install. That installed it. I created a little desktop file for it in USR share X sessions. Still using the XR and R file hooked up to LightDM to set my primary and secondary screen. But with this, I had real problems with working with the bar. And I can't remember what program I actually had a look at initially. I'm just quickly looking at the system that I have here. DWM blocks, that was the initial way of setting up the bar that seemed to be the recommended way of doing it. It has its own bar again. You're not using Polybar here. It's all built in. And I had trouble with DWM blocks. It would have been user error. I was configuring it wrongly. But essentially what would keep happening is the bar would show up, but then it would stop looping and it would just be static. So it stopped working after a while. So the big thing that DWM taught me was, firstly, you have to patch DWM to add any sort of functionality beyond the defaults. And it hasn't got a huge amount of functionality in its default setup. And I learned how to patch DWM. It's a one-shot thing. You only have to do it the once. Once it's done, you can move your DWM folder from system to system to system, or just download it from my GitLab. That's what I do. And it just works. You just do then a sudo make clean install and all is good. And it took a little while to get used to the patching, and I do have a video on that if you want to have a look at the bits and pieces. But what undoubtedly DWM taught me more than anything else was it got me messing about writing my own bash scripts, which all of these individual items actually point to. In terms of configuring its key bindings and everything, you'll often hear it said that DWM doesn't have a config file. It only has source code. And if you want to change things, you change the source code, which technically is correct. However, it has got this file within the source code called config.h. It's written in CDWM. And actually, any changes that you want to make, you make to this file. And once you've made it, you have to recompile the thing. But again, straightforward, takes less than a second. And yeah, I didn't find it that hard to work with, to be honest, getting DWM set up. The patching was the big thing. So I had to patch all sorts. I think I used about 8 patches in total. Can't remember which ones. I'd have to go through the list. But I literally didn't try and apply every patch out there. I think about 8 patches in total. So that was fairly straightforward. The bar, I simply have a whole range of scripts for each of these items, and I created one single script to run them. You use this command xsetroot that you'll see at the bottom of the script there, that runs each of these variables that I've created, and each of those variables talks about a script that I've got in a DWM scripts folder, each one that I've written. Initially, I mean, I've changed it a little bit now, but you'll see it's separated, and I've got an update script and a weather script. And I didn't want these 2 scripts to run as often as I wanted the other scripts to run, because these are all running every 5 seconds on a loop. So I separated it into these 2 sections, and I had one running every hour or however long 3,600 seconds is, and then the rest of them running there. All pretty straightforward, to be honest. But it took quite a lot of time to write the scripts and get it doing what I wanted. Right. The big problem I had with DWM was actually getting the bar to launch properly. And I think it was probably a permissions problem. I actually had my path set in my bashrc initially, pointing to my DWM scripts directory. And it often wouldn't launch. I've resolved that by setting my path in the .profile file in my home directory rather than in the .bashrc. And that seemed to solve the problem. I think .profile runs before .bashrc. So, but anyway, whatever the reason, it seemed to work pretty well. And what I ended up doing as far as a startup is concerned with this is I point the desktop file in usrshare sessions to the original .initrc file that is in my home folder, which I've got open here. And you can see I'm using this as a startup. So I'm using PyCom, obviously the Polkit agent, Nitrogen again to set the wallpaper. I'm starting the status bar here. I've got that DWM bar script. I'm setting my keyboard to GB. It's funny, I keep having to do that manually with every tiling window manager, but it's not a huge thing. And it seems to work really well. As I said, I've patched it. The initial configuration isn't this kind of straightforward Xmonad style master and stack, but it's patched to actually show that. I'm just having a look at the patches. So if I go to my DWM folder and I do a list, I've still got all the patches here. So what have I got? I've created an auto start folder, which in the end I've never ended up using. Attach aside, color correction patch, cycle layouts, restart the signal so I can do an in-place recompile without having to log out of DWM, the rotate stack patch, the status all mons. I think these are color scripts that are meant to allow you to color the bar. The tagov, I can't even remember what that does. Something to do with the tags. And obviously, I want my useless gaps. So I was using that. Worth saying here that it caused me a little bit of consternation, DWM, because there are patches to be able to get, to make what you're showing on the bar different colours. I didn't have a lot of success with those. I mean, I managed to patch, but what I found is that they had the effect of slowing the system down, to a crawl. So in the end, I had to remove the patches. What I ended up doing here was using colour emojis, which is what you can see here. And it was it was the first time that I started using colour emojis. And I had to fiddle about installing a number of configuration files from the AUR in order to get colour emojis to work. I'd point you in the direction of Luke Smith's videos, who's gone into great detail on this. But ever since then, I did that. And I have to say that DWM remains a contender for my favourite tiling window manager. And probably up to this point, it is the one that I've stuck with the most. Well, the one thing about me is I don't like to be beaten. And the fact that I'd failed on getting Xmonad and Qtile sorted out was nagging at me. So I went back to them with a little bit more knowledge about how these tiling window managers worked. And it took me a while, but I finally managed to get my Xmonad working and configured how I want. You can see, looking at the bar there, again, it's using Xmobar. I'm not using anything like Polybar. And it's set up very much like Spectrwm. Again, there's your traditional master and stack. I've got everything working with the same key bindings. And again, yeah, it looks very, very similar. The key to getting Xmonad configured is this monstrosity, xmonad.hs, which is the config file. And again, I went back to DT's configuration as a starter. I think most people do that with Xmonad because he probably has more knowledge about it than anything else. I have lots of libraries and things imported. I'm not sure how many of these are actually required anymore. Some of them are probably not required. And I've stripped out what was DT's Xmonad to just have the basics in. And to just do what I wanted it to do. And it took me a long time to get this to work, I have to be honest. But I did manage to get it to work. Clearly, I like this dynamic window manager, and I do like Xmonad because it's a dynamic window manager, but it's never going to be one of my favourites. And that's because I just can't get my head around Haskell. And I don't want to learn a programming language. I really don't. It doesn't interest me. So if it goes wrong, Xmonad, and it does sometimes, it tends to take me longer to debug than any of the other window managers. And for that reason, it won't be my favourite. Again, the bar took a bit of getting used to, and it has a script for each screen, and this is what it looks like. Again, it took me a while to get used to. I haven't got any emojis up here at the moment. I'm sure I could include them. I've never actually explored it. But nevertheless, it is what it is. And essentially, Xmonad was just the challenge. I wanted to get it working. And I did. And I then moved on to the next challenge. So, I've sorted Xmonad. I move on to Qtile. And amazingly enough, I think I'd learnt so much messing with these different configuration files that when I went back to Qtile, I couldn't understand what the problem had been. Because I found Qtile amazingly easy to configure. And I have to say that Qtile next to DWM is currently on a par, my favourite window manager. It's pretty much, it's an Xmonad clone written in Haskell, not in Haskell, in Python. So it has the same master and stack. We have a straightforward configuration file, which I really struggled to understand. But when I went back to it, it seemed so easy. And I've actually spent time on my config, putting it into some sort of order and properly commenting it. And we then have, all my bar up here. I'm using emojis again. I'm using some of the inbuilt modules with others. I'm actually pointing them to particular scripts that I've written, jumping on some of the DWM scripts for some things. But for the most part, I've been able to pretty much use what's inbuilt with Qtile. And yeah, you need to work your way through it. Nevertheless, I found it pretty simple on the whole. So that's your main config file. For startup, I followed the same process as I followed with Xmonad, where I was using the .xinitrc file for startup. I just did a copy of that and called it .qtstart, and essentially deleted the start DWM bar part of it, but everything else is pretty much the same. And I found it, I have to say, to be flawless. I found it to be flawless, and I have, without a doubt, found it to be the nicest and easiest to configure window manager that I've come across. I think the bar is so easy to configure, it's untrue. And, you can even, make these things all do stuff. I can change layouts just at the touch of a button. I'm not even sure if I have these hooked up to anything, to particular things. Oh, yeah, so that just mutes the sound. Okay. I don't know if I've got these as interactive or not. I'm guessing not, to be honest. I must admit, I've been in LeftWM for a while, so I've sort of not played with Qtile for a while, and I must have a look at what I've actually done with this bar. But anyway, I'll unmute that now, if I can. Can I? No, apparently I can't. Right, so maybe that's an issue. It's a while since I've been in it. Nevertheless, it's pretty easy to configure, and if you like Qtile but hate Haskell, I don't know what's happening there. Okay, I perhaps need to have a think about what I need to do with this. But if you like Xmonads rather, but you're not that keen on Haskell and you're finding it quite difficult to configure, maybe you need to have a look at this. I've been really impressed with it. I've obviously, since I've been last using it, got a bit of sorting out. Oh, no, there you go. I knew I had some of these that were interactive. I just couldn't remember which. I've clearly got to sort out this script. It says it's 263 degrees, which is clearly wrong. I tell you where I'm using Qtile all the time. I'm using it every single day at the moment on my laptop in the house. But I haven't been using it quite so much on this system. I've just literally dropped the configuration file onto this system because I played with it and got it set up on my laptop. So I need to make some modifications here. But I will say, I love this system. Let's just do one last window manager to take us to where I currently am, and then we'll have a chat. Okay, so finally to the window manager that I have done a video on, LeftWM, written in Rust. It's the window manager I've been running on this machine, my main desktop, whilst I've been running Qtile on my laptop. Hence the reason, as I said previously, that Qtile isn't really set up for this machine. But LeftWM, Well, it's another Xmonad clone. I've done a video on it. I'm not going to go into huge detail. I've been really impressed with it. It has limited functionality compared to the likes of Qtile and Xmonad. But as I've already said, I tend to strip out the things that I don't need. I'm again, as always, using Alacrity here. And if I go into the configuration file, LeftWM, let's just have a look at what we've got there. I'm just trying to remember. So the config.tom. Okay, so this is all your key bindings basically, which work pretty well, and I've got it, sorted out to do pretty much what I want it to do, and I'm really enjoying it. I've got all my standard key bindings. For the file manager, I'll open up PCman FM. Power spec, so if I want to shut down, I've got a little script here, that works. I'll just go mod X, and it brings up this D menu, shut down, reboot, or suspend. What else have I got here? Genie, yeah, so if I want to bring up a text editor, there you go. What else have I got here? I'm just having a look. My Rofi, of course. So what have we got there? So show emoji. So if I want to copy and paste emojis. I got used to not using a system tray quite a while ago. So, if I want D menu, there you go. You can see D menu or Network Manager D menu there. What else have I put in here? Obviously, as I said, Rofi's there, as it always is. And let me just shut that down. What I tend to use now for volume, for sound, and let's face it, it's only really Network Manager and volume that you even need a system tray for. I just use a little terminal program. I can't remember what this is called. I will have a look at it afterwards. And this pretty much does everything that I need it to do. So let me just actually have a look. I can't remember what I've hooked that up to. So if I look in my bash RC, I'll be able to tell you what the alias is. Pulse Mixer. So that is what I've actually chosen for that. So Pulse Mixer is the command line tool that I use. It's made a system tray irrelevant for me, even though the likes of Qtile and so on have the facility to add one. I just don't bother anymore. I haven't found that I've needed that crutch. LeftWM, I think it's coming on really well. I prefer it to Xmonad because it's really simple to configure. It's just its lack of functionality that I'd still go for Qtile or TWM over it. Let's go and have a chat. Right, so that was my journey. And I suppose there's two questions that come here. Have I completely converted onto tiling? And I think you all know that the answer to that is yes. I didn't think I would initially because I found it really difficult to get used to the using key bindings because I was so mouse-centric. But by forcing myself to do it, it feels natural now. I mean, I'm not completely keyboard-driven. I use mouse and keyboard, but I quite like the way that tiling window managers work. I like the way that they work with multiple screens. It's forced me to actually start using workspaces, which, to be honest, I didn't really use before. It's taught me a lot about bash scripting because I've had to learn it in order to get the managers to look how I wanted them to look. And generally speaking, I like them all. Which do I like more than others? Well, I think I like I like all of the Xmonad clones, and I like Xmonad, but the fact is that I find it very hard to tweak it and configure it. You know, there's the Haskell thing. So I think Qtile is going to be up there as, you know, I'll have to say a joint number one, because it will be a joint number one. Because number two, for me, has got to be DWM. I've spent longer with DWM probably than any other of the tiling window managers, and I find it difficult to choose between them. So DWM and Qtile are undoubtedly my favourites, but all the ones that I've shown you, you know, have their strengths and have their limitations, and I think they're all worth trying. And the fact that I've gone through this process of trying them all, it's been a learning process from start to finish. And that's how I eventually managed, after an initial failure, to finally get Xmonad and Qtile configured, because I'd had experience and a bit of a learning exercise with the other tiling window managers I tried. So I'd encourage you all, you know, if you want to go that route and you want to look at tilers, to feel free to pull down my configs. They're all works in progress. You know, you never finish tweaking these things, but they're up there as a starting point if you'd like to have a go. Right, well, thanks for watching this video. Little bit of a mini announcement. We're just over 2 years into this channel, and we benefited quite a lot from the lockdown, especially the first 3 months, sort of April, May, June, perhaps even July of last year, when my work was suspended and I was on furlough, and I was able to produce, you know, 3, maybe 4 videos a week, which had a massive impact on, you know, my subscriber count. And we're now, you know, above 15,000, which is great. So thank you for your support, guys. I've got to the point, though, where, you know, I'm very time poor. I work a full-time job that takes at least 50 hours a week. The only time I have to do anything else other than my job is really the weekends. And there are a number of things that are causing me to make some choices. The first one being that, well, we've come off lockdown, and I have family and people to catch up with, and I want to spend some time catching up with them over the weekends. The second thing is I have jobs to do. Over the winter, I lost fence panels from the garden. I have to get them put back up. I have all sorts of other jobs in the house, decorating and all bits and pieces that I need to spend some time on and get stuck in. And of course, I have my latest hobby, my bike, and we've actually got some good weather now, and I want to make sure that I do maximise the good weather and go out on my bike. Goodness knows we don't get much good weather in England. You know, it's often a case of weeks rather than months. So there won't be the standardised Saturday videos absolutely regularly on a schedule for a month or two. I'll do them as and when I can, but I'm not going to prioritise them for the next couple of months, because I've got other stuff I need to catch up with. Once I've caught up with it all and the weather turns, well, we'll get back into a routine, but I've got to take some time out. Now, I realise that has an impact on particularly my Patreons. So what I've done, guys, is I have suspended all of the July payments, because it didn't seem fair to me to take money off you if I'm not actually producing videos every week. But it's a temporary thing. I just need to get some stuff done. Once I've done the stuff, we'll be live and kicking again. So, yeah, I've thought long and hard about this, and jobs that I need to do are piling up, and I just have to get them done, guys. This is a hobby at the end of the day. It isn't a job. And to be blunt, it doesn't make enough money for me to worry too much about that side of it. But we will be back. Hope you've enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you when I next produce one. Not sure when that'll be. Thanks, everyone.